Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the IPAF and JLG webinar entitled Understanding Access Control Technology, What It Is, and Why You Need It. I am Stacy Wolt with IPAF. I have placed all participants on mute so that we can clearly hear our presenters. If at any time you have a question, please use the Q&A feature or raise your hand. The Q&A feature is located on the left-hand side of your screen. Only the presenters and myself will see your questions. We will make every attempt to address questions during the presentation as they occur, and we plan on leaving some time at the end of the webinar for further questions. Lastly, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and we will distribute a link later today. Today's webinar is with JLG. Misty Mason is part of JLG's project management team. She is responsible for managing the commercialization and product lifecycle of digital technologies as they pertain to the Clear Sky telematics program. One of her main goals is to work with engineering and purchasing to bring market best-in-class digital solutions that will enable customers and end users globally to work more efficiently. Misty's professional background includes product management, marketing, and budget management. Misty joined JLG in 2014 to manage and develop current and new aftermarket programs. As part of JLG's digital project team, Dan Adamson is responsible for new product design and implementation of digital products and technologies. Dan's focus is to design and deliver reliable and leading digital technology solutions that provide value to customers. Using his experience and knowledge, Dan has led the engineering efforts on JLG's recently launched access control system. Dan joined JLG in 2015 as a project engineer in new product development team with the Girardin Group. He has been in his current role since July 2017. Dan has 12 years of product development experience, including design, test and validation, and project leadership, having worked for Volvo Construction Equipment and General Motors prior to JLG. Misty and Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stacy, and to other members of IPAF for inviting Dan and I to speak on this exciting topic. We also appreciate the time our attendees have taken out of their day to join us. We hope that you find the information as appealing as we do. So on that note, let's dive into the reason we're here and learn more about this intriguing subject of access control. So the topics we'll cover include the core concept of access control and, at a high level, what is access control. Then we'll explore ways that access control is used. You may not even realize you are using access control in your day-to-day activities, and Dan will provide some examples. From a general perspective, we'll look at how access control works and explain the basic functionality of this feature. Next, we'll talk about some industry challenges and how using access control can reduce these pain points. We'll also discuss the main features and benefits of this impressive solution from JLG. Lastly, we'll look at the future of access control. So what is access control? In a generic form, access control is really a solution that either grants or denies a person access to a system, an area, or a location based on a user key code or credential. Basically, access control breaks down into two main categories: allowing only those operators who the site manager or a decision maker has provided access to, and providing information to help make informed decisions, such as operator tracking and machine usage. Allowing only approved personnel to operate the machine has its advantages for safety, theft deterrent, and contract management. With a higher focus on operator safety, systems such as access control are beginning to become more of a necessity. These systems determine if the operators using the equipment on a work site have been verified to have been trained or hold the appropriate training qualifications on an RFID card. Operator tracking is really a direct benefit of requiring authentication for machine usage. Without the requirement to use the machine, there would not be an incentive for an operator to authenticate through an access control system just to be tracked. This benefit can begin to answer an array of questions from who used the machine all the way to how did the operator use the machine when linking access control data to machine usage data. Later in the presentation, we'll look at access control in our terms and how it can apply more specifically to our industry.
So how is access control used? In the next few slides, we're going to take a look at where access control is currently used in our everyday lives, as well as where it's being used in a couple of industries. So access control, when I kind of took over this project or took the lead on this project about a year ago, was kind of a new term to me and not one that I really thought really included getting into your house or even into your car, but really it is. So it's everywhere in our everyday lives, from unlocking your car, your home, to gaining access to a parking garage or a hotel. And what I'm showing here is really some more technology based solutions, but it can be as simple as using the physical key that we use, or have used for years to enter a car or a home. As we discussed, as Misty just discussed, it's primarily granting access or denying access with that potential added benefit of user tracking. So in a lot of the examples shown on the screen, you don't really get that. You may not be able to track a specific user, but you are getting the benefit of limiting access. In other examples, such as entries into an office building, as kind of seen above, it is relatively standard to be able to track each employee specifically with a unique ID. So I want to talk a little bit here about a use case that's just happened here pretty recently. I'm actually a member of a sportsman's club, and over the last 2 or 3 years, my membership basically consisted of you got a code, a 4-digit code for a padlock, which are very common, and really that was effective in keeping people out of certain areas of the grounds. However, what started to happen is there was misuse of these grounds, and they wanted to really add in another form of access control and being able to track who was there and to give a little bit of history as to why did some of that damage occur. So it's kind of been an interesting transition that I've seen happen, again, in everyday life, not really in industry, but where now they've implemented an RFID system to where the gate is RFID controlled rather than a padlock, and they can look back and understand the history. So again, it's really just kind of showing you can have the very basic access control that we really interact with day in and day out in our everyday lives, and you can add in that extra benefit of being able to track. So as we now look a bit more into where access control is being used in some other industries, forklifts have been using this form of technology predominantly, and really, again, are using it for the same 2 reasons. Limiting use, obviously for some safety concerns, and Misty will talk more about the benefits later on in the presentation, but as well as being able to track their operators and track productivity. We've also recently, through some of our partners, have really found that also in the ground support vehicles at airports, they're using the same type of system. And another benefit that a system like that can offer, specifically what we've learned in the ground support vehicles, is that you can limit the operation of a vehicle to certain areas of a site, whether a building or an airport, based on user credentials of the equipment. So again, kind of linking that user data with some additional position data or machine data, you can start to access and really restrict the use to only certain areas. One benefit that airport industry currently has that we've seen is that a lot of that, really the majority of the workforce there, the operators, are required to have RFID cards for getting onto the sites. So it really allows a great way to be able to access these pieces of equipment. So Misty, can you go to the next slide for me? So how does access control work? Really, we want to look at this kind of at a high level, but it's really a pretty basic system. And again, kind of back to what Misty was talking about, it's really there to grant or deny access, like we just talked about. So the first step is to really have the right hardware on the machine. Obviously, one of the most integral parts of the hardware necessary is an operator interface device, which shown here in this picture is reading one of the IPAF smart PAL cards, and it's our developed keypad with RFID reader built in. And that is, in our case, that is the device that we really use that will link the operator to the machine. So once that is available on the machine, you have the hardware, really then a machine owner would really set up or activate access control, which would then initiate the machine to require authentication for use. During this setup, a machine owner or a decision maker or a manager, supervisor would also build a list, so an authorized user list, which would be stored locally on the machine for authentication. At that point, the machine really, or the system really just behaves and takes those credentials that are entered as an operator from the operator and checks them against credentials that are stored and then either grants or denies the access to that machine. So one thing that I did want to touch on here, again, this is a very high level of how all access control systems basically work. But one thing I wanted to specifically note that JLG has done in our development is we really tried to make this a flexible system. And what I mean by flexible is that we know that not everybody uses the machines the same way, and not everyone will use access control in the same way. So being able to make that flexible to conform to different use cases and how different customers would want to use it is something we saw to be very important during development. And now I'm going to kick it back to Misty to dive into why we should use access control.
Thanks for that, Dan. Before we discuss why you would use access control, though, I want to briefly touch on challenges in our industry. So safety should be the top priority for all of us. We want our workers to go home the way they arrived on the site that day, alive and with all of their limbs. According to OSHA, if we eliminated the Fatal 4, approximately 600 workers' lives could be saved per year. The Fatal 4 include falls, which is the #1 construction fatality, struck by an object, electrocutions, and caught in between the machine and an object. So to reduce accidents, job sites need trained and qualified operators, and site managers and owners need to have a peace of mind to control which individuals use a machine. The new ANSI standards for 2019 places greater responsibility on the equipment user and owner. Employers, owners, and operators must be in compliance by December 10th, 2019. As North America's standards reinforce safety and shift closer to international standards, companies will need to consider how they meet these requirements with the use of technology, such as access control. As accidents happen, logistics costs will increase, as well as fines adding up for violations. According to OSHA's site, the penalty for serious violations cost approximately $13,000 per violation. Quite a bit of money. A decline in the skilled labor force coupled with employee turnover. This is also a challenge, but it's no reason to have untrained or unqualified operators on machines. And of course, increased project planning and timelines are an inevitable output of the above challenges. So why would you use an access control system? What is the benefit? Now that we've touched on a few of the industry challenges and we've explained what the solution is and a little bit about how it works, I hope that you can also see the benefit of using an access control system. We've already touched on a few of these, but I'll go through a few of these again. These include safety and security, which of course is one of the main reasons to use access control, by only allowing authorized operators to use your machine. This enables safeguards for the decision maker to control who operates which machine. Another great reason to have access control on your machine is to protect your asset. While having a telematics device installed to pinpoint the location of a machine can help deter thieves, by adding an access control system, this can increase the likelihood that the machine will remain where it is located. Protecting your asset also means tracing machine usage and how the machine is being driven and also how it's being operated. Lastly, tracking an operator's time in and out of the machine helps to optimize productivity. So currently, most systems work by verifying that an operator ID matches an authorized operator ID within a list. This requires list management that could also be really time-consuming and an inefficient task, especially on a large site with a lot of operators and possible turnover. With the JLG system, you can select to authenticate based on qualifications, which will then match a qualification between the operator credentials and the machine type. One example is a 3B mobile boom machine type. And this does require a smart interface, for example, RFID card, to extract this information. As cards become more prevalent in the field, though, this could be an easier way to manage the usage of machines and still achieve the operator tracking. The pre-use inspection is a task the JLG recommends to be completed before machine usage for the day or when operators change. With this new feature, it allows you to configure the system to inquire that the operator has completed the pre-use inspection. If an issue is found during inspection, an operator can also make a selection that will initiate systematic alerts to key personnel or subscribers. A decision maker can then take action to determine if that machine should be used or not, and if not, to then apply a lockout. The machine lockout feature allows a user with elevated privileges, such as the machine owner, to over-the-air or locally lock out the machine, which will allow no one, authorized and or trained or not, to use the machine. This could be used in the case of safety. For example, if a machine is scheduled for maintenance and should not be used, the machine owner can remotely prevent any operators from using the machine until it has been diagnosed, receives maintenance if needed, and deemed okay for use again. This can tie an operator to certain diagnostic trouble codes set on the machine that would indicate training, or a refresher could be needed for better machine usage. One example of this has been operators triggering the foot switch event numerous times, which happens when the operator is trying to make the machine function before pushing down the foot switch, which should really be engaged first. So this data provides the site manager with targeted information on who needs training and what type of training is needed. By providing meaningful data through equipment utilization reports and operator performance data, decision makers can improve utilization and uptime. So the machine lockout can also be used to remote manage the machine's contract usage. One example of this would be where a rental house wants to prevent their machine from being used when it comes off rent, at least until the driver arrives to pick up the machine. This would be especially important over a span of a few or several days, a weekend, or a holiday. Once the driver arrives, the machine owner can remotely update access for the driver to pick up the machine.
So Misty, we had a few questions coming in. I'd like to try and touch on a couple of those before we head on. One of the questions is, this is a great tool to limit only the person who rented a aerial work platform or a mobile related work platform to access the control. How easy is it to add and remove operators? The system has been designed to make that very easy and offers actually a couple different solutions to that. That can be done through a web portal and then communicated over the air to a fleet. So it can be done, again, to an entire fleet that were rented to a site, or it can actually be done local at the machine. So through a few different sequences of button presses and the right privileges that we'll talk about a bit later in some slides here, kind of create a hierarchy of how some of this works, but those elevated privileges would also be able to add operators, again, locally directly at the machine. That can also answer another question about forgetting a card. Is there an override that can be used? Again, you could add, if you forgot your card, you could again be added locally, maybe using a different number, and that usage could be for the day. Another question is the IPAF PAL card provides info on the classification the operator is approved to operate and the number of specific operator. Can the access control allow all operators who are approved to operate that class of equipment or just a specific person approved? So Misty just touched on it there a little bit, and that was really the highlight of trained operators. So, and what she kind of talked to was absolutely in a day-to-day, these systems are typically used against a list, an authorized user list. What we've put in and what we've developed here is being able to use exactly that data. So on the card, you're absolutely right, there's qualifications, for example, a 3B. So potentially for management of a list or just using that data rather than having to say that specific person, you could absolutely use that data, the 3B coming across from the card, and base authentication off of that. So I think that's a very powerful tool, and as RFID, and as we're going to kind of talk here in some future authentication means as it becomes more prevalent, I think that that absolutely will be a great option of a way to authenticate and use a machine. And then along the lines of can reports on who operated, when, pre-start inspections, etc. Absolutely. So all of the data, this goes again to operator tracking. All of that data is being consumed and tracked. So absolutely there can be reports made on who operated, when, did they complete pre-check, what was their selection when the pre-check system was active. You can also begin to, as Misty was talking, start to link that, for a training monitor, link that to DTCs and start to understand, or, this is kind of the start of being able to create operator scorecards. And then there's another question about new ANSI safe use standard requires users to create a safe use plan that included prevention of unauthorized use of equipment. Is this technology intended to meet that requirement? I would say yes. So we are absolutely looking at this of how it will be used to meet the requirements, to answer requirements. So I would say yes, that is the plan, and that's how and one of the reasons that we've been developing this over the last year or so. So with that, definitely keep asking the questions. Just wanted to touch on a couple of those while we're here, and we will dive into the future of access control. So what I want to spend a little bit of time on here in the future, obviously the future is the future and can be hard to predict, but really what I want to take a little bit of time into is look at how we really authenticate and the future of how we see authentication changing and progressing, and really with looking at that as comparing it against an automotive example. And then the other part that we'll look through here that I kind of touched on is we'll take a little look into the hierarchy of this type of system and what that really means and what it allows us to be able to do. So to kick into this, obviously, as everyone's pretty familiar, it's a very relatable example is the automotive, an automotive example. So if we go back, let's just say, for example, 20 years, 30 years maybe, really the main authentication was a unique physical key. And this worked well in the automotive industry, typically because there's a one-to-one type of relationship. Owner is the operator. And again, we'll talk about that in the hierarchy slides in a couple minutes. But this was really used to access the car. That's how you got in it. That's how you started it. Then the industry started to progress and go into what I would still call active authentication, but added, again, another feature to be able to remotely unlock. And this kind of all flows in this arrow at the bottom that says minimize user disruption. So no one buys a car or a vehicle to unlock it and get in it. They really just want to drive it and let it take them places, transportation. So the easier that you can get in the vehicle and continue on with your day is really the goal here. So where I'd say we're at today, for the most part, and for I would say 99, if not all, new vehicles are equipped with what we would call passive authentication. It's still a unique fob. It's unique to that car, but is passive authentication, where it can remain in your pocket. You walk up to the vehicle and you're just automatically, allowed in. That authentication is happening without really any action from a user. And then when we take a step, again, where we're going, and this is already starting to happen, we're starting to see it with some higher end cars, is really beginning to even get rid of the fob. So why do I really need to carry another device with me or another piece of hardware with me? I'm always attached to my phone. Can my phone be the key? And that's really what we're starting to see in this industry, is that Bluetooth Low Energy, using that technology, or near field communication, or NFC, being able to really take over and be your key. So I just really wanted to go through that as an example. I think it's all relatable, but how do we compare to that in the construction industry? So if we look at really where we are today, for the most part, I would say we're in this common physical key, and it's really a necessity in the industry because of the hierarchy and the one-to-many relationship. So the machine owner is not the user, and there's multitudes of users or many users that need to use it, and handling unique keys would be a challenge. However, the benefits that we just talked through with access control and with having unique keys is something that's desirable for safety and all of the benefits that we just talked through. So we'll discuss the hierarchy again in some more slides, but early forms of access control systems, such as the one pictured here. Sorry, it's a little slow on my computer there. It's like a programmable security lock. Did start to allow, this was an early access control, and really gives you the ability to be able to have that unique key code for an operator and a unique key. But tracking and scalability was limited. So where we really find ourselves with the development of this system is kind of in this next phase where we're able to use different technologies. So on the kind of the far left of that arrow is a picture of our keypad that we've developed, and really what it's showing is that it does have full numeric digits to where you can use a key code, or we can use the smart PAL card that our system's compatible with. And where we see it really going in early stages of development of using NFC, or near field communication, to where you can really replace that card with a digital card through a phone. And then where we really want to get to is where automotive was doing the same thing and offering all the benefits of access control, but without limiting or disrupting the operator today. So today an operator really isn't disrupted at all. They can walk up, they can use the machine. However, we don't have the benefits of access control. So where we really want to get to is, don't disrupt the operator's day-to-day. Let them continue to work as they are today, but still have the benefits. And that's really passive authentication. So being able to authenticate and do everything that we're doing now just without any action from the operator. So a little bit into the hierarchy, and I've kind of touched on this already some, but as we look at, I think the automotive example is a good one, just because we can see that they're doing things very similar, and they are obviously on a technology grow path, but their hierarchy is very different than our industry or construction industry in general. It's typically the vehicle owner is the operator. Typically, it's a one-to-one. Yes, there can be obviously more family members or different things, but typically one-to-one. But with some of this new technology that's coming along with NFC and digital apps and things, is you can start to get temporary use. So valet keys have been in circulation and been on a lot of higher-end vehicles for quite some time. But what some of these companies are doing with these apps are creating almost a shared network, to where maybe you don't want to hand over your master key for your car, but you're okay giving a limited or a temporary use for a 4-hour availability key to someone in your office. And some of those things are starting to happen. But where we start to look at our industry and compare it to that, really where we are today is you kind of have this. We have a one-to-many, and this list where it says operator could go on forever, because really it can be anybody using the machine. And really the machine owner, the only way they're really controlling it now is just they have to have the key. Just a quick example, I was in Boston last week at a show and walked by multiple construction sites in downtown Boston, and I could have operated and used a multitude of equipment. I had no business using it, but could have, because keys were in it and it was on site. So, but understanding that the reason that we're at this, at these common keys is it's a necessity for the way that the industry works, but how do we get out of it? So in this case, the future, for lack of a better term, the future is really now, in that this hierarchy can be set up now on systems like we're developing and will continue to grow and be expanded. So if we start on the left, you really have a machine owner, and that's really the same as today. We would kind of look at that as a rental company or a machine owner. And then they can delegate, and they can assign operators. They could assign what we kind of call a supervisor or a manager. And these are just terms, but they have different roles. So an owner kind of has the highest privilege. They can override other system changes. But these supervisor type roles, or these manager roles, would also be able to add additional operators and add supervisors and add, again, create just a larger hierarchy and a net of people being able to be added and authenticated on these machines. So the question that I answered earlier about how does somebody get added or how easy is it, it's very easy to do through a portal. It's also very easy to do online, or not online, local at the machine. So in this type of hierarchy allows that to be done, as well as allows all of it to be trackable. So you would know which, if you look here, these all have A's or B's or some letter after them, because we actually know who they are now. We can look through this list and we can say Site Safety Manager A is responsible for adding these operators, and that's who they've added in their time, and then they've used the machine in this way. Again, it's all trackable, and I think this is really where benefit really begins to come in and will be scalable even in the future. So with that, really that is the bulk of the information. Just to summarize a bit of what we talked through, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions, is access control overall is a solution that allows only authorized and or trained operators to gain access. It does provide some a decision maker type role with the data to track machine usage and operator performance. And then talking through the benefits, companies will benefit highly from access control in the areas of safety, cost of ownership, and productivity, like Misty talked through. So while I really think a system like this has potential, and I believe will be a major enhancement in the construction industry by improving the challenges that we discussed and offering those benefits. And one key thing is, while the system really has the potential to change how we manage our machines and use it, like we talked really earlier on in the slide, the technology that we're using and of how an operator will interface with the device and a system overall is really, we're already used to using that type of technology in our everyday lives. So as well as this could be a disruptor in the market because it's a new solution, it can really change how we do things. The technology shouldn't disrupt or be new to operators and users of our equipment. So with that, we want to open it for questions. One thing I'd like to state here as we start to look through these questions, and I'll try and get to all of them and get to what we can, is we have a link here to an email as well as the site for detailed, very specific details on how the JLG system itself works, as far as how it works, what machines it's applicable to, cost, and all those things. We'd really like to direct those questions more into that to that email or to there, so that we can follow up more directly with you. We don't really want to get into those details on this call. So now let's take a few minutes and look through some questions. So do the access control limits the engine to start only to authorized operators? So access control can limit can limit multiple things. Absolutely, what we are doing and what most of the systems that are currently available will interrupt start or interrupt ignition. But there are, some other alternatives to that that I think can also be powerful.
One of the questions is this with JLG exclusively? So yes, this can be used on JLG machines. You do need a CAN telematics device. That is the device that will be communicating with the keypad and then sending that information back to the portal. The portal is not necessary. I think Dan already mentioned this earlier. The portal is not necessary to basically add or edit operators and machines and to schedule or to set them up with qualifications, check the pre-check button, things like that. However, you could add an operator via the keypad as well as the site. But the site is more functional in that you will receive a lot more information and be able to really optimize that information, look at the utilization of the equipment and what the operator has been doing.
Okay, so another question, RFID, what does it mean? It's radio frequency identification, is what RFID stands for, and that technology is very well in markets and in industry. It's used for a lot of different things. Obviously, RFID badges, like the Smart PAL card. It's a smart card that holds a lot of information on it, and that information can be accessed by a reader. No different than a hotel key or a credit card, honestly.
Mm-hmm. We also have another question about the subscription cost of the hardware and or the service. So really, for those type of questions, our pricing can vary. If you could please just send those questions over to the contact information on your screen. We will get back to you, I promise, as soon as possible. Another question was whether this is a factory installed option only. This is actually an aftermarket option only at this time. So you can purchase the kits through our online express system or with a customer support rep at JLG, again, for additional information about how to do that or to order. Just reach out to the email or the phone number that you see listed on the screen. And as far as which machines can be retrofit, that's also a good topic, just to reach out to that email or phone number, and they can tell you about how far back we can go with machines, which machines can be equipped with that keypad as well as the CAN device.
So kind of along those lines, I want to answer the question of, can this track operational functions such as rotate, extend, drive, so basically machine usage functions. The system as a whole can do that. So what we've done here is we've linked this with our Clear Sky system. So understanding that your access control is being made, it's adding extra benefit to an already telematics system. So if you are already being able to track some of these operational functions, which is in plan, obviously you have the already available telematic information of machine on and off and DTCs that are set, some of those things. As we continue to expand that and get farther into machine integration, having a system like this, yes, can track again machine usage. There's a question about a safety override to allow anyone to operate the machine. So there is, without getting too detailed, we basically just have ways that, again, locally or over the air, these commands can be sent. Locally, it's through keypad presses or interaction through the keypad to basically disable the system, which would allow, so if for whatever reason it needed to be overridden, or to allow anybody to operate for a day or a period of time, that could be done. One thing that I do want to just talk to on safety is this system has gone through a lot of safety and risk analysis. Obviously, safety is at the forefront, so trapping operators and those things have been reviewed. So any more details along those lines, again, I would push those questions more towards the support link above.
Another question that came through, can limiting the area of where a machine can be operated, can this be limited to a part of a building on a job site, allowing only the person who rented it to use it in that area? So within our system, our Clear Sky system, there's the ability to set geofences where if a machine happens to go out of a certain area, depending on which email or person you designated as the person who received the alert, they will be notified that the machine has left that area. For this solution, though, it's only intended for operators only. So as far as saying, there are other things that you can do and put in place within our system that would answer that question, solve that question for you. Okay, we did touch a little bit on the older machines. So we can actually talk to which machines and ages and things like that, but it's helpful to have the serial number information of those machines. So again, if you just wanted to reach out directly to the information that's on the screen, that would at least provide us with the information. We can check our systems, we can validate which machines that we can place the system on, and then we can let you know.
So there's another question. Can you talk a little bit more about the IPAF usage on this? Hopefully I understand the question right, but we've definitely developed our system to be compatible with the IPAF PAL cards. What that means is we've worked with IPAF over the last year or so and have been able to develop and create a device that is associated on our machines, that is put on our machines, that will be able to extract that data from the cards. Also on the other side of the IPAF is the link to the API. So through our portal, if you're using IPAF cards and you're entering IPAF users, we have also developed and integrated in with the IPAF API. So we do appreciate the IPAF collaboration through this, and definitely are excited about being able to be compatible with their system and compatible both on the machine side for reading the card and into their back-end systems for loading in operator information through the API.
Okay. Another question here, will the access control system be controlled by the user or by the owner of the equipment? As you mentioned, this could be granted access via the portal or online. So the access control system really is owned by the equipment owner. They are the person who has that escalated privilege if they wanted to do the machine over-the-air lockout for any reason. They have that ability to do that. They also will set up the site manager. So the site manager will have access to the portal, and they'll have access to set up operators as well through the keypad or the portal. But this is access that is granted to the site manager from the equipment owner. The site manager, so based on those permissions that site manager is provided, he will have limited but enough permissions that he will need in order to do what he needs to do functionally for the access control to work within the site. The equipment owner, however, will have additional privileges on the site where they will see more information and be able to do a little bit more with the access control system. I hope that answered your question.
So there's a question about, can this be used on trucks that travel on the highway? So we have obviously developed this system to be used on construction machines, or on our machines specifically. But a technology similar to this, or a variation of this system, could absolutely be used there. But again, it would be something a little more generic that is outside of what we've currently developed. Along kind of those lines, there's a few questions about, can it be put on existing machines and things. Again, those are some detailed questions. Again, I would, don't want to push all those questions to the link above, but without getting into too much detail, we do have offerings for aftermarket kits that could go on machines. Specifically what machine, it would definitely be best to go through that email above. But it can absolutely be added. It would take some hardware and some different hardware. Basically, we'll leave it at that. But thanks for the questions. And then there's another one: in case of an emergency, i.e. rescue, how would others gain access immediately? So I don't want to get too detailed into the nitty-gritty of how the system works, but essentially, if it's in the platform, if someone's elevated or if ground e-stop, there's timers in place, and everything is initiated for ending authentication based on ground e-stop. So, and then there's timers that have been put in place that will not allow immediate ending of authentication to allow for things like rescue. So, like I had said above or before, this system has gone through a lot of safety and risk analysis internally to our JLG group, and we have looked at a lot of those cases of rescue and how people would be end their authentication and how people could be rescued. So in a case of an emergency, you would be able to operate as the person that's currently logged in to rescue somebody due to the qualifications that it takes to actually end your authentication period. So again, those, without getting too detailed into exactly how our specific system works, if there's more questions on that, definitely reach out and we'll be more than happy to answer those.
Yeah, another question here. Will this become standard on equipment, or is this an additional option? So because this is an aftermarket only solution, we're not making this standard on equipment. We have heard from our European colleagues that, due to a lot of the safety regulations and safety in general just being so important, that this type of system has already, it's been in the market, and so customers are expecting and requiring basically this type of solution for their machine. So I know I mentioned earlier, North America tends to, or we are starting to follow some of those international standards as far as ANSI standards go. I'm not going to say that I think this will become a standard solution, but I will say that as far as safety goes, it's a hot topic, and I can see where this is going to be adopted rather quickly by customers, and I think our end users, site managers, I think they will appreciate the level of safety that we're trying to place on these pieces of equipment. So basically, it's not just about keeping people off machines. That is nice, yes, but it's also about keeping people safe.
So a question about, can you have 10 machines keyed all the same for job sites? want to make clear that the key that we're talking about is not a physical key. It's essentially a digital key or a key code or an RFID card or credential, essentially. It's a unique, we can just call it a user ID. So absolutely, those could be keyed the same for sites. So I'm assuming the question means you have 10 machines going to a job site. Can they all be the same? Absolutely, and like we talked through, that can all be done through a portal, or you can do that locally. It's definitely a little bit more cumbersome to do 10 machines of the same, all the same operators locally, directly on the machine, but it can all be done for kind of a fleet level management, and that is for the system that we are talking here today. Does offer that fleet level type of management through a telematics service. Any other questions? Can you turn the key on or off through the system as to not kill the batteries? We don't have any physical way to turn a key on or off or to do a battery disconnect in the system currently. It can be, like Misty talked through, it could be locked out, but we don't, locked out in the sense that no one can use it, but we don't have a way that we would be able to hit a battery disconnect or physically turn the key from an on position to an off position.
All right. Well, that was quite the list of questions today. Participants, we thank you very much for joining us, and Misty, Dan, and JLG, we thank you for presenting today. Participants, please do keep an eye out for an email that will have a survey link on it. You will have the opportunity in that survey to submit additional questions. We also will send a link to today's recording of the webinar, so keep an eye out for that email. Thank you again to JLG, Misty, and Dan, and we appreciate our participants for attending. Have a great rest of your week. I'm sorry, Dan?
Just from Misty and our side, we just wanted to thank everybody again for the participation. Thank you for the questions. I definitely appreciated the time to be able to chat about a technology in general and specifically a little bit about our system. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and we just hope that you guys have enjoyed our presentation. But again, if you have any questions, and I know we've highlighted that throughout the presentation, but there were a lot of questions, and if we did miss any, we apologize. Just trying to get through that list, just trying to figure out if some were common ones or replicated ones. So if we did miss anything, we apologize. It wasn't intentional. Just reach out to that contact information that was on the screen, and someone will get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.